Hello and welcome to the Subjective Space with me, Sindhu Rajasekaran. Today's guest is a world-renowned political philosopher, Aakash Singh Rathore, who is the author of several amazing books. His book, Hegel's India, A Reinterpretation with Text, was reviewed and recommended by the likes of Slavoj Žižek. And his latest book is the best-selling book, Ambedkar's Preamble, A Secret History of the Constitution of India. I have obviously a million questions to ask you, and I've cut it short to maybe 100. So I'm gonna start. Let me just ask you the sort of first question that's on my head, that's really eating me up right now. Is about liberalism and conservatism, right? And what that even means anymore. Because let's looking at it from a sort of global sort of perspective, right? So those who represents what, because there's so much political performativity going on. There is it's also the post-truth world, and so it's who stands for what is major chaos in my head. That's one thing. And obviously you have this whole anti-wokeness campaign going on in the West. Recently you had this the Alabama law against diversity, equity and inclusion, which is going to be implemented in universities and such. And you know how there is this anti-reservation thing going on in India as well. And talking about political performativity and all of that, you have the likes of Rishi Sunak and Nikki Haley, who represent sort of, and they're conservatives, but they're brown. So oh, look at them.
Yeah, what's going on is a good question.
What's going on?
This morning when I thought I'm going to speak to you, I thought there's no worse time to try to talk about politics than today, because of utter confusion in political democracies, utter social confusion, and for me, utter personal confusion. So I for decades I have been very, very left leaning, too left, anarchist, basically. And I remember very early on in college, when I was 18 or 19, a friend of mine who tolerated my political opinion said, you're so far to the left that you're on the right. And I was 18, so that was 30 plus 35 years ago. And I still remember it because it scares me a little bit. It scares me for a couple of reasons. The objective reason is, as you probably know, there are so many cases where when someone is politically radical, whether left or right, they pop back and forth from one to the other. And that, I think, is kind of scary. And then the fact that I don't want to be someone who does that is what really bothers me. But there's still a kernel of truth to it, because left and right have always been more symbolic than actually capturing the truth of an ideology. But now more than ever before than I can remember, I'm old enough to remember Reagan and Margaret Thatcher. So there was a social feeling at that time that things are getting weird. And when you look back at that era, it's so normal. The way that today people are romanticizing about the good old George Bush days, when and even the in the US, the Trump people consider George Bush to be a very left and very siding with, because he's friends with Michelle Obama or whatever it is. So the only thing that anchors me is that I, in my own life, remember a time when you could feel change. And right now, it's almost so many weird things happen on a daily basis that you're too numb to it, and you don't know. With the so-called wokeness movement, people will have you believe we're becoming very radically left. And with Trump and I mean, Trump is just like all over the world. It's pretty clear that there's a very sharp right-wing movement. And this is, of course, normatively and ideologically. Economically, I think every economist has shown that since the 1980s, we just keep going farther right, as far as economic theories are concerned. But so today, I don't know. Sometimes maybe too much of life happens on Twitter. I was tweeting X, sorry, yeah, triple X or whatever. I was
X, you mean X?
I was posting something,
Yeah.
and a friend of mine, who's very, very, very brilliant guy, he commented that in the way that I had posted, I was making a universal assumption about the word desi for Indians and the Indian diaspora, and I thought, well, I had no idea that even this was a term that's been problematized now. So two things happened. One is I thought how hard his life must be that he has to police everybody's language all the time. And two, how hard my life is because I'm getting too old to know what terms are fashionable and out of fashion. I guess I mean that is we'll probably talk about AI, but I think the personal assistant, one of the main things that an AI assistant is going to be useful for is political performativity, to tell you when you're transgressing the ideology that you want to actually be symbolizing. So I'm sorry about the rambling, but the fact is that I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going on with politics.
I mean, you are a political philosopher.
I don't know what's going on with the left and the right.
You're meant to philosophize.
The fact that we have, a few different kinds of polities, one, the presidential kind with a couple of parties and the parliamentary kind with a number of parties. These have been like an accordion kind of becoming very similar and then very different, the way that primarily two parties emerged in India over the last decade, and the way that in the US people are really hankering for independence, but the structure just doesn't allow it. So whether it's the formal system or the informal system, like Cornel West not getting any news time in the United States, even as academics, we know how brilliant he is. I don't know how capable he would be, but I don't know that capability is really a criterion these days. So people are very confused about the terms, and I don't even know. They may be just like when a reptile discards a skin and the skin kind of just stays there intact. I think maybe liberal and conservative are just those things now. They're just these skins that really don't have any life, but people identify with them because they don't know what else to identify with.
I was going to ask you this a little bit later, but I think now is probably a good time to ask you this about Nietzsche's, transvaluation of values and why be moral at all. And this is something that I'm obsessed with. Is truth true for all time? And this is something I read. I got my Nietzsche reader out because I knew I was going to talk to you. And I pulled out a quote that I really like, and I want to read it out to you. And then you tell me what you think about this in terms of, the politics of today. He writes, the ability to contradict. Everyone now knows that the ability to endure contradiction is a sign of high culture, but that the ability to contradict calls for a good conscience in enmity towards the customary, the traditional, the sanctified, which is from the gay signs. So the problem is, if somebody says something in the political space, or even as a public intellectual, you've said something, and then it's not necessarily you're contradicting it, you're sort of maybe shifting that point or changing it. You're not allowed to do that, because if you are a liberal and you're a conservative, you cannot sort of, take any point of view that is contradictory or it changes. So how can there be any progress or anything that can happen in society if everyone's like, if you said this, that's it?
So there are a lot of swirling ideas in my head. I had mentioned before we started recording that I'm working on a book on AI, and a big part of it is Nietzsche and AI. So on another occasion, we'll talk about that, since we share both of those interests. So I've been going very deeply into Nietzsche the last few months, and that's dangerous. It's a dangerous thing to do. Yeah, it's really nihilistic, and as I told
It's very
you
nihilistic.
this morning when I was thinking that I was going to have a talk with you, I was kind of worried that I feel like I've become a nihilist. So if she asked me questions about, normative questions like what ought we to do or something like that, right now I have no idea. I'm just so bleak. So okay, Nietzsche's, in that
Yeah.
quotation, there are two kinds of sides to it, both technical terms. One is his idea of a good conscience. I have never really understood what he's talking about, because everything else that he talks about seems to contradict the idea that anyone can have a good conscience, other than embracing the fact that one can't. But so forget about the technical side. The more fruitful aspect is about, at least there was one thing that Nietzsche was always consistent about, and that was speaking out of season. So when everyone is going in one direction, he takes it almost as an obligation to articulate the other side of things. And there are a lot of bizarre kind of class issues wrapped up into that, because he saw himself as very aristocratic and hated the vulgar masses. But if we can leave that sociological side out of it, so that's something that I think is pretty important, because if you want to contradict, or if you want to adjust or appropriate or something like that, there's a wider situation going on. Like, where are you standing? You mentioned, is truth really truth for all time? So where are we standing when we disagree or when we agree? And obviously we're situated in a point in time, historical time. This has a little more to do with Hegel than Nietzsche, but where truth is manifest for us. So if you and I were to say something right now that has, I don't want to be gruesomely politically incorrect, but let's say about child marriage, or something on sexual matters, it's pretty easy for us to come to an agreement on it. But you pick either one of us up and send us back 1,000 years, and if we retain our genders and so on, you realize our opinions are going to be so profoundly different. And so the contingency, like, why do we believe what we believe, and its relationship to agency? Who am I? Because I'm sure you and I both kind of identify our essential selves with some of our ideological ideas or moral ideas or political ideas. And yet it's a complete chance that we happen to be born in the 20th century and thus have these ideas is deeply disturbing. And so Nietzsche's kind of insight is, I believe, don't be fooled by what you think is true, and certainly don't be fooled by what other people tell you is true, because the temporal horizon interferes a great deal with what he would call the epistemological or the knowledge horizon, and that's part of why that's part of the momentum of all of his writings about how much he despises the present and wants to think otherwise, like not as though he's in the present, but think towards the future, philosophy of the future he's always talking about, is because he wants to
Mm.
how how would we think about this if we had made progress? I mean, you question whether progress is possible, but had we made progress, how would we turn back and look at the opinion that we're holding now? And so you want to judge yourself by against that kind of attitude. And yeah, I'm still stuck on your liberal conservative thing. I'm so confused by this. So I don't know what to say, but
So let's make it more. This is something that I do a lot with my thesis right now. That I get consumed by the larger thing. That so my PhD supervisors are always like, come with some,
okay.
get a particular, and then you can like focus on that. So let's come to Indian politics. So let's talk about leftist Indian politics, which you did mention. And the thing is, that's the thing, right? Because as when I started off thinking about these things in my life too, I would say towards the left a lot. Like, even my feminist thought was there. But even when I wrote Smashing the Patriarchy, I was like really questioning a lot of things, even from that side. Like, so I was questioning things of the left, and I was critiquing even leftist ideas. And that, obviously got me a lot of heat, as you can imagine. So my question is, my major problem with leftist Indian politics, I would say, is to do with class, caste, and gender, especially caste and gender. Because obviously those who occupy for most of time, I would say, has been from a particular, dominant caste, dominant genders. So, what exactly does that even mean, right? That's one point. And with respect to the Congress, which is sort of like, I wanted to ask you, is the Congress dead? Is the Congress left? Is the Congress right? What is the Congress? Should we even care about the Congress? It's so hilarious that people are still sort of stuck up on Rahul Gandhi, and everyone's like, oh my God, he's coming of age. I'm like, are you guys kidding me? And it's like, people are like, oh, Priyanka Gandhi's going to become like, what the hell? Okay, forget them. And then the BJP shifty politics, because the BJP is sort of like, they have empowered a lot of women within their party, I guess, and they're more democratic if you look at the structure of how the party is, all of that. So I'm really confused I'm confused. So if you can speak about this in terms of how things shift and how, in terms of who's liberal, who's conservative, what's happening in Indian politics.
I don't know if you know that I used to be an official advisor to the Congress Party. So I still edit a book series, basically a Congress Party book series called Rethinking India with Penguin. There are 15 volumes. I think we finished the 9th one now. And the first one, I was myself the editor with Ashish Nandi. And I think it was called The Idea of India or something like that. And what it was essentially a kind of Congress Party manifesto. Now, I'm telling you all of this because I mean, I don't know who's going to see this, and if Congress people see it, I'm going to be doomed. But no, that's all right. From the very moment that it came on, which was about maybe, I don't know, maybe 10 years back, I first I threw all of my energy into trying to make Rahul Gandhi what we call him RG. Trying to make RG become what history needs him to be. And after a couple of meetings, one, I was writing a speech for him. And during the speech writing, he said, I want to say this. And I said, the only thing that I want you not to say is what you just said that you want to say. It was for a big event in Bangalore in 2017. And it was an Ambedkar related event. And he wanted to say use some word that basically Dalits find very paternalistic. And, kind of like Harijan or something like that. So I said, just whatever you do, please don't say that word. And then I wrote this, I worked with his speechwriter on the speech. couple of months pass. He's on the stage at Bangalore saying that word over and over and over and over again. And so it just took me that amount of time to realize that this is never going to work. He's never going to occupy the space that history, seemed to try to allot to him from generations. And then, of course, there were these election routes, really bad ones, throughout 2014 and onwards. And I started to think, looking at the feudalism of the party, and the way that, so people would be very, very, like I was a real oddball amongst the advisors, because I was an academic, and I had my own life, and so I didn't have to be a yes person in order to move up. A yes man. And so what would end up happening is that I would keep disagreeing with people like ministers and stuff like that. And everyone their jaws would drop. Like, you just don't disagree. Who is this guy? And how come we see him more than once? Because if we were to disagree like that, we would never be seen again. The reason I'm telling you this is it's the feudal nature of the party is so fixed and strong that people who know very well that they should be advising otherwise won't advise otherwise out of fear of reprisal. And so I'm extremely sycophantic. Like, the previous two elections ago, when RG thought he was going to win like 113 seats or something like that, everyone I knew was saying, no, we're not going to win any. It will be lucky if we win any. And then after the election, when the Congress performed so badly, RG literally said, how come no one told me that we weren't going to win anything? So, like, I didn't believe him. It was very difficult to believe that all the advisors that he had kept lying to him that you're doing great, boss, everything is perfect, and we're going to win. But I think that's how the party structure is, that it's so feudal, profoundly patriarchal, and then coming to the social question, it's also pretty casteist. So the function of a Dalit, or the function of an OBC, or the function of a Muslim, and so on, is very clear. You're here to represent, to get us this constituency. So there's no kind of organic association. Like, if you're a woman in the party, that's your role, to be a woman in the party, right? So you represent the women's, exactly. So you've got all these fixed identities, and the identity at the top is, of course, the Brahmin man, who Rahul Gandhi, represents, which is but that's a different thing. That's a different thing, because you can get a kind of, I'll just put it to you in a very simple manner. The Indian ambassador to Italy once had a meeting with Sonia Gandhi, and he started speaking Italian to her, and she immediately dismissed him and told him to leave. And the lesson was, never speak in Italian to the Gandhis, because they need to be quintessentially Indian. So you can't, because the attack from the BJP is that she's a foreigner and so on. So the Italianness and his light skin and all of that stuff that's very attractive to Indian middle classes is useful, but it's kind of a something that you can't articulate. So
I just want to say before you go on that the funny thing is, though, that the idea of India that I was brought up with, or sort of what I liked, or what my family thought was the Nehruvian idea of India, that's what I was brought up with as well. Like, my dad was a civil service officer, so we I grew up in that sort of environment, with IAS officers, kids, and whatever. So it's like I wanted the Congress to do well, progress, to become this. It's not that I don't. It's not like I dislike the Congress. It's just that I'm sort of depressed by what's happened, I guess, because it's just become a complete, like you said, it's like if you cannot predict what's going to happen, and you're like, what, taken aback by like, oh, I lost? What? Like, that's like a complete
Yeah, they're so
disconnect with,
insulated.
I don't know,
Yeah,
the
the BJP
grassroots,
has
right?
such a great grassroots game, and the Congress Party just watched it, happen and didn't because of because of how rusty its structure is. It just couldn't mobilize and imitate and start doing the things that were clearly working, from simple things, WhatsApp groups and all of that sort of stuff. So, I realized, and this is the part that I've already told many people in Congress, that until this party is utterly decimated and there's no trace of them left, I don't think there's much hope for a kind of left liberal progressive regime in India, because this family is just going to keep popping up. And they're going to keep popping up. And like my wife and I have a huge, I shouldn't mention her politics. She's a government servant. We have, the people in my family are arguing with me a great deal, because the recent election, where Congress seemed to do well and BJP seemed to contract, everyone, the progressives in my family, are so excited about it. And I think it's a terrible thing, because one more election and I think Congress would have been done. And that's what we need. We need that. Now, this is like a Hegelian political philosopher speaking, not a citizen, right? Like a citizen is, we need normal people that we can relate to. But, but
more like
but
by
from
law
the
school,
sort of grand narrative point of view, if this party does not get out, just get out of the way, like Biden in the United States, right? I don't know if you saw that debate between Trump and Biden a couple of days ago. Yeah.
No, I haven't seen that. I mean, I only see the memes where he's just sort of shaking.
What the debate showed.
I haven't seen the debate. How did it go?
So my American side of my family, they're all Democrats, right? So they were horrified. They're like, we had no idea he couldn't create a complete sentence. I was like, how can you have had no idea? It's because you refused to penetrate through CNN or whatever comfortable political news channel you wrap you shield yourself with. So he was totally inarticulate. He couldn't, even the thing that was going to make the Democrats easily win, which is the U.S. Supreme Court overturning Roe v. Wade. In the middle of discussing Roe v. Wade, Biden started talking about immigration, which is the thing that the right wing are so strong with. And so, just fumble after fumble. But even, it's not so much content, it was the fact that he couldn't finish his sentences. And he would get lost in the middle and give that blank stare and things like that. The reason I brought it up is the way that Democrats look at, like, how did we get ourselves in the position of having to rally behind this 80-year-old white man? That's how people feel in India. Like, how is it that we've gotten ourselves to having to desperately hope that this kid, everyone still thinks of Rahul Gandhi as a kid, that this kid will one day blossom into a statesman. I mean, but it's completely absurd. So from the
come of age,
from the citizen, the ordinary person point of view, it's all horrifying and depressing, and you feel nihilistic. My American side feels totally nihilistic about Biden and Trump in the United States, and the Indian side totally, I cannot celebrate with people who think that the recent election was good, because it just means it just locked in more of the same for another decade or two. Whereas had there been a third crushing Congress defeat, we might have, people might have said, okay, enough is enough. We can't do this for the rest of time. But since they won a few seats, here it goes again. Priyanka will take over.
Yeah.